Welcome back. What a surreal week. Think about it. How often have you seen a president proclaim, quote, "I am a very intelligent person"? Of course, that came just 2 days after two senators from his own party who he'll need to pass anything questioned just that. Listen to Republican Jeff Flake saying, quote, "We must never regard as normal the personal attacks, flagrant disregard for truth or decency, having nothing to do with whatsoever with the fortunes of the people that we all have been elected to serve." Surreal? We haven't even just talked about the JFK files, but let's talk about the fortunes of with the president. And joining us for more is State Representative Joe Gruters, the chairman of the Sarasota County Republican Party, former State Representative Keith Fitzgerald, Zach Anderson, political editor for the Herald Tribune, and Wendy March, political correspondent for the Tampa Bay Times. And I want to start with tax reform, and I'm going to aim this at you, Joe, because not only are you a state rep, chairman of the Sarasota GOP, but you're also a CPA. And when you hear early reports that the House tax plan is going to include putting caps on people's non-taxable contributions to their 401ks and also certain manipulations in terms of deductions of federal and state taxes, including mortgage, that will sound to a lot of your own customers and clients and the people who are watching this right now as some sort of war on the middle class.
Well, I think that at the end of the day, the tax plan, if we could pass it, will do wonders for the American economy. Will continue to get people back to work. But you're right. Anytime anybody is trying to change the tax code, it doesn't matter if it's a Democrat president or a Republican president, they're going to face many obstacles, because what they're trying to do is they're trying to close all these loopholes that have been created throughout the years in order to try to give additional benefits to one new group. And so as a result, what you're seeing is there's a lot of people that don't want some of these the deductions that have been in place for a long time. And yes, as a CPA, some of these plans could take away a lot of our business. But after talking with a lot of CPAs from a lot of different firms, a lot of people aren't really overly concerned about the whole system being revamped.
Well, anybody with a 401k would be. I mean, why would you mess around with the tool that is the chief tool for middle-income Americans to save for retirement?
And I agree with you. And I think Donald Trump has come out and said that the 401k, he's going to take that off the table. And I think the end plan, what you're going to see at the end of the day, may be vastly different. And I think what you're going to do is, I think we'll see the child tax credit be increased. I think you'll see one or two other changes. I don't think you'll see an entirely new tax code or tax system. But I expect the minor changes, but changes that will continue to drive the economy forward, put people to work, and help the middle class.
Keith?
Well, listen, I would love to see a tax plan that cleared out the underbrush of the thousands and thousands of special deals for particular businesses, particular clients, and so forth. It's really ridiculous. But there's something really wrong about a tax plan that will transfer wealth to the top 1% while making it hard for working stiffs like me to save for retirement by taking away our ability to build up our 401ks. That's just not going to swim. And I think that it may well change before it's done. I think everybody across the boards for simplification. But this is if it passed in this form, would be one of the biggest transfers of wealth from the working class and middle class to the richest people in the history of the United States.
Zach, what are the political implications here on the Suncoast? Because we have a great many very wealthy residents, but we also have a lot of working class stiffs like Keith over here. People here messing around with the 401k. Is that going to affect, in the end, the way anyone votes?
It certainly could. You know, tax reform is sort of the holy grail for Republicans. They've been wanting to do this since Reagan. And there is a big potential political upside for them, but there are also political pitfalls. And you mentioned one of them, you know, this 401k issue. Capping 401ks might not play well with middle-class voters. There's also been talk about SALT, state and local tax deductions, which mostly affect more liberal high-tax states, but also would affect Florida residents as well. And it's unclear how those would play with voters. I think Republicans are gambling that, you know, they need to do something, and also that tax reform, whatever they pass, people are just going to be happy that they cut their taxes, and that's going to help come election time.
Wendy, I wanted to get you in here during this break. We have a number of incumbents on the Suncoast and throughout the entire Tampa Bay area. Do you think this issue alone, tax reform, is going to change any votes?
Well, it could if something like the 401k cuts passed. But I got to agree with Joe. There's no way in the world that anything like that is ever going to fly. The howl of outrage from vast majority of people would be deafening. Wall Street obviously opposes it too. So yes, that could, but I don't think that's going to happen. Donald Trump initially said absolutely no way. Then 2 days later he backed off and said, well, maybe. But still and all, that will not pass. It'll become, assuming that something like a transfer of wealth from the working class to the wealthy actually takes place. It'll be a campaign issue. Democrats will harp on it in ads in 2018, but I don't know how many votes it'll change.
All right, we are just getting warmed up, and we'll have much more on the Week in Washington right after we check the first alert weather. Stay with us. Welcome back. We're talking about the week in Washington, and joining us for more is State Representative Joe Gruters, the chairman of the Sarasota County Republican Party, former State Representative Keith Fitzgerald, Zach Anderson, political editor of the Herald Tribune, and Wendy March, political correspondent for the Tampa Bay Times. We had some bizarre exchanges this week between President Trump and Republican members of the U.S. Senate, which kind of led President Trump to say this.
You know, people don't understand. I went to an Ivy League college. I was a nice student. I did very well. I'm a very intelligent person. The fact is, I really believe the press creates a different image of Donald Trump than the real person.
I don't think I've ever seen a president stand at the south lawn of the White House and have to proclaim how intelligent he is. But you put that in context to the ongoing battle between him and Republican Senators Corker and Flake and McCain and Joe. What's your reaction?
Well, for the most part, we do have a unified party. We have some stragglers out there, but who are these guys, Flake, McCain, Corker, to say that the voters in the primary were wrong, that the voters in the general election were wrong? We elected, as a party, we elected him to be our nominee, with everything that he campaigned on, to be our nominee and then to be our president. I think they're making a mistake, but I think that they're doing the right thing by exiting the stage so we can get good conservatives in there so we can help pass Trump's agenda. Because at the end of the day, we can't have obstructionists in our own party preventing us from moving our agenda forward.
The interesting thing, Alan, was that question wasn't actually about his intelligence. He was kind of deflecting there. It was actually about his civility, and the criticism from Flake and Corker and others has been that he is his temperament, and that he is uncivil, and that he's difficult to work with, and that he says things that maybe people think sort of downgrade the office of the presidency. And it's maybe Trump's biggest asset in some ways. His supporters really like that he sort of is pugnacious and says things that people don't typically hear, and it's also his biggest criticism. And it'll be very interesting to see how it affects the campaign season going into 2018, because I think there's a lot of people that in the party, the Republican Party, that are worried that it could drag down some Republicans if they're too closely affiliated with some of the controversial things he says.
Wendy, all this comes in the context of a new poll that came out this week from the University of North Florida that said the president's popularity in Florida is down to 37%. What does that say to you? And if it's 37% statewide, what does that mean in terms of, let's say, from Sarasota to Tampa?
Well, I think what it means, that particular drop, by the way, it reflects, it's almost exactly in parallel with a national drop. Fox News just had a poll come out that had very similar results, and it's a significant drop there in that poll as well. But I think, to begin with, Trump has taken some hits recently on Irma, on his fight with Frederica Wilson over the death of the black soldier, the soldiers in Niger. I think it reflects some of that, but I have to say I think it also shows that maybe the Trump base is not as invincible as everyone says it is. The Fox News poll, for example, showed a major drop in support for Trump among non-college educated white men. That's the heart of his base.
Yeah, Keith, I got to ask you, where are the Democrats? because, you know, I always mention this, that David Jolly, the former Republican congressman, was on this show a while back and saying that this is the perfect opportunity for Democrats to come up and show the American people, if they want to win back those middle-class voters, their plan, whether it's for tax reform or stimulating the economy. And I hear nothing pretty much but silence.
Well, there's not silence. It's that the president is so very good at sucking all the air out of the room that what Democrats and many Republicans are saying doesn't get covered. And if you look at races that are not considered generally competitive in the United States House of Representatives, Democrats have raised 5 times more money than they had in the last cycle. So they're getting ready for a big campaign. But let me just say, back to the context of this, I think it's a crisis of legitimacy in our whole system. There is no question that President Trump has diminished his office. The presidency is a special office. It has the unique job of pulling people together. All he does is divide and divide and divide and divide. And he has more or less left the whole legislative process up to the legislature, which, because of the divisions he's caused within his own party, can't get anything done. So this is a real crisis.
It's probably worth pointing out, though, that Flake and Corker are outliers. You know, there's not a lot of rank-and-file Republicans that are criticizing the president. You don't hear a lot of people who are running for re-election criticizing the president. He still does have pretty significant support among Republicans.
But if you look back to the last several presidents, you have not heard other Democrats go after Barack Obama like that, or other Republicans go after George W. Bush.
Well, it was interesting. I actually heard a podcast today where FDR, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, was going after some conservative Democrats who were against the New Deal. So it's not unprecedented to have the president feuding with senators in his own party.
That was a very different situation historically. It's not a good analogy, really.
Trump is trying to drain the swamp. He's different from everybody else up there in terms of he's not a career politician. He's trying to change the way things operate. And listen, some people that have made their entire career and their entire lives has been in the swamp, they don't want to change the way things work.
And I have another question, but at what point do you have to get past the line trying to drain the swamp and then showing some kind of results?
Well, there you go. It's results. And the problem for us is the economy, the market's up 25% since he's been elected. GDP is up. A lot of things are going well overall. But at the end of the day, once we get rid of some of these obstructionists from the Senate and we can replace them with good conservatives, we will get that agenda moving forward.
You've got to listen to what Joe's saying, because it's important. What he's saying is he wants to narrow the Republican Party to a smaller and smaller group. That 35% that seems to be right with Trump, maybe 75% of the Republican Party, is less than what Republicans had in the last election, and that is a path to a big, big loss.
What I want people to do, if you voted for repealing Obamacare before Trump was elected, and you switch your vote now that it's conveniently able to do so after, that's a problem. People have to stick with what they campaigned on, and these senators that have obstructed President Trump are basically telling the entire country and the entire Republican Party that you made a mistake with electing him.
One more question. A tweet from the President of the United States. It is now commonly agreed that after many months of costly looking, there was no collusion between Russia and Trump. Was collusion with Hillary Clinton, HC. I'm sorry, Joe, I must have missed Special Counsel Mueller's news conference.
Well, listen, everybody knows that, well, we're waiting to see what happens with the special counsel, but at the end of the day, you can just tell that this Russian dossier or whatever that came out was funded by the Clinton campaign. The uranium deal that they're now investigating with Hillary Clinton, Barack Obama. Listen, Russia is all over Hillary Clinton. The fact that the mainstream media wants to say that a couple $100,000 or tens of thousands of dollars of Facebook ads in states that didn't matter after the election actually impacted the race is absolutely crazy. This has been a complete attack on Trump to try to undermine his presidency. We're going to get past this, and Trump will do great things.
Again, if I'm thinking strictly as a partisan Democrat, I love that speech. As far as the dossier is concerned, let's understand the dossier had nothing to do with the launching of the investigation, and it has not played a substantial role in the shaping of the investigation. Not only that, every piece of evidence in it that's material to the questions has been corroborated by independent research on the part of the prosecutors. So that's just a red herring. And this uranium stuff is like some kind of crazy internet thing.
So when they asked the two political reporters this question, at some point, one way or the other, we're going to have the results of the Mueller investigation. Before or after the midterms, what kind of potential impact could there be if we think that things are pretty upended at this point?
Well, I guess the first thing I'd say about that is you have to go, it's easy to forget how far you have to go, what the huge burden of proof that's necessary to unseat a president. In other words, to threaten Trump's position in office, the findings of Mueller's investigation would have to be pretty dramatic. Think back to Watergate.
Right.
It's more likely that what he finds will be more along the lines of more drips of water eroding away the rock.
All right. We have to take a quick break, but we'll be back for final thoughts in just a moment. And our guests join us right now for final thoughts. Zach, the president this week announced a national health emergency to fight the opioid crisis in this country. We are the epicenter of the opioid crisis here in Florida, but I've heard reported that he did not declare a national emergency, which would have basically opened the doors to a lot of different kinds of federal funding. Health emergency is somewhat less, and it would tap into a bank account that at this point is close to zero. So what will that really mean here on the Suncoast?
Well, as you said, we are the epicenter, not just in Florida, but here in Sarasota and Manatee counties. There's some of the highest overdose rates from opioids in the entire state. It's a huge problem, and I think it's important that the president made this declaration. He's bringing more attention to the issue. It makes it easier for everybody to come together to try to find solutions to this problem. But you're right, it didn't go as far as a lot of people would like. You know, the big issue at this point is probably funding to get money for addiction treatment services and things like that that have been underfunded. The state legislature is moving towards providing some additional funding. I'm sure they would have been happy if there was some federal funding as well.
And Joe, I know that the state legislature has been moving towards funding, but I heard New Jersey Governor Chris Christie on TV this morning saying that the real need is to get the federal funding that will go towards Medicaid, so a lot of these very poor opioid addicts can get beds and facilities, and right now that is not happening.
Well, the great thing about Florida is we have our great governor, Rick Scott, who has a close relationship with the president, and I think he's going to continue to work on that issue. And I know the governor has laid out a 5-point plan that will hopefully be funded with at least $50 million. This week, in collaboration with some of the substance abuse groups here in Sarasota, and I also have the endorsement of both Manatee and Sarasota Sheriff, I presented a bill to the House that basically, the 5-point plan, what most plans are talking about, what most bills address is the solution after you've already had it. My bill is about prevention. It's going back into the schools almost with a new DARE program and the 5th grade, 15-week curriculum. Prevention is needed, and it's not being talked about nearly enough.
The one thing that the president said yesterday, it kind of harpens back to Nancy Reagan's just say no. He seems to be saying if you just talk to your children and tell them to stay off drugs, that is a solution.
Well, listen, if there's any issue that we should try not to be partisan about, this is it. The dimensions of this crisis are staggering. There were about the same number of people who died from opiate overdoses last year as Americans died in the entire Vietnam War. This is a stunning crisis. So I don't want any bickering on it, but it does absolutely need dollars. Prevention is a part of it. We're never going to get out of this by arresting people. We need all kinds of stuff. It's got to be a broad spectrum approach. We need better science on how these addictions actually operate. So brain science is important. We need a full spectrum approach to this.
Wendy, I'll give you the last word. We talk about the opioid crisis all the time, almost daily on this broadcast and all others. But in terms of what people are concerned about, in terms of voters, do they vote on an issue like this?
Well, I was just going to say, and this is my thought on this, in spite of what Keith said, in spite of the truth of what he said, I don't see this as an issue that's generating that much heat among the voting public. And I think one reason is it does not involve the things that have made drug addiction such a hot issue in the past for Nancy Reagan. It does not involve, for the most part, African Americans who are subject to racism. It's spread equally among the races. It does not involve crime cross-border transportation of narcotics or money, the kinds of things that tend to grab voters. And I think that's the reason it's not getting the kind of attention that he rightly pointed out it deserves.
We'll have to leave it at there. And FYI, you can watch past discussions on demand. They're available on Apple TV, Amazon Fire, and Roku. And just a reminder, if you want to stay up to date on the latest breaking local news and see alerts on your phone instantly, iPhone and iPad users, you will need to download our new news app. Just go to the App Store and search for WWSB or My Suncoast. Android users, just don't worry about anything. You'll get the new version automatically. We want to thank all our guests for being here tonight. Joe Gruters, the chairman of the Sarasota County Republican Party, former state representative Keith Fitzgerald, Zach Anderson, political editor at the Herald Tribune, and Wendy March, the political correspondent for the Tampa Bay Times.